Welcome back to Campaigns and Cantrips, where we provide DM tips, D&D ratings and rankings, and actual play reviews. If this is your kind of content, please make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and engage. On today's episode of Campaigns and Cantrips, we are talking Critical Role campaign for characters. Now, in a previous video I made my guesses for what those characters were actually going to be, what classes and subclasses. So if you're interested in my original guesses and if I got them right, go check out that video. But in this one, we're going to talk about what characters I have found the least intriguing to most intriguing. And this is kind of a mix of things that went into this ranking. Some of it had to do with the amount of information that we got from them in campaign or in episode 1. Some of this is their classes or their subclasses. Some of this is their backstory. So it's a general mix of things that went into this ranking. And I thought about doing this immediately after the episode. But also it was like 6 in the morning UK time. And I also wanted to ruminate on this a little bit and kind of start thinking about what characters kept popping into my mind and what was I trying to figure out about them and their backstory and their secrets and their classes and their features and just kind of what dominated my brain in the next few days after episode 1 had aired. So I'm going to start with number 13. And that's going to be Murray, which is Marisha Ray's character. And the reason that I think Murray ranks at number 13 for me is simply because we didn't get enough of Marisha at the table, which is absolutely fine. They had 13 characters to introduce in this first episode. And I know we're going to get more of her and Murray in these next few episodes of the prologue. So no issue there. But I think I just didn't really get a ton to go off of. I love the accent. I love that she's bringing in that Kentucky. I know she mentioned in the cool down that it was very much her mom, and I love that. But I just didn't get enough of backstory or features or anything like that to really think much more on Murray other than that's cool. I love that Marisha is really going for it character-wise. I think as we get into it, I think I will definitely be intrigued as, she presents very bard-like in her character art. But she's a wizard, which is I actually guessed in the video that I did about guessing their classes and subclasses. So that was kind of just a wild guess, by the way, but I'm really proud of it. However, how are we seeing that come to fruition? She's very bard-like, but she is a wizard. She's got the Harlequin vibes going on a little bit as well. So very intrigued with that, but we just didn't get enough for me to really start listing out a ton of things of yes, this is, I would say, is my most intriguing. Now, at the end of the prologue, I may do this again and see if things have changed based on more time that we've spent with these characters. So currently, Marisha's Murray is number 13, but still a really enjoyable character. And I can say that for every character as well. Now, at number 12, I had Robbie's Cadigan Vale. And I was very excited for this character at the start. And I think this, again, just suffers from we just didn't get enough time with Cadigan as a character. That scene or scenes were very focused on what was going on with Thimble and Cadigan definitely using the clue spell to put everything together was really great. And we got the quick interaction between Cadigan and Octus and the wolf and the cat or the fox. And I thought that was really interesting. But again, I just didn't get enough time spent with him. I do want to know, what his connection back in the day, when they were all fighting, and how that is now turned into kind of this loner, Aragorn vibe kind of guy. But that's kind of where my intrigue stops currently. And I think, again, it's just we didn't spend enough time with him. So I am interested to see kind of where that goes. And I love Robbie. I love Robbie as a role player. I love Robbie as a player. And so I think he's going to have so much depth in this character that I think the more time that we spend with him, the more intrigued that I will become by his character and trying to figure out everything and what's going on. So number 11, I'm going with Hal. And I know that, we started out with a lot of Hal, And even though we had a lot of Hal at the table, we didn't really get much of Hal. It was very much being the brother of a dead guy at the funeral, um, which doesn't, I don't think, necessarily shows the extent of what this character is and could be. I'm still really hoping we get the tragedy bard. We're definitely kind of leaning into that. I haven't seen if the tragedy bard has been confirmed anywhere, but hoping for that because I think that will make it very intriguing and interesting. But just didn't get a lot. Like, you had a lot of, reaction to other people at the table and other people at the funeral and that kind of thing, but not necessarily who Hal is as a person and as a character. So that's kind of where I'm leaving that. I am very intrigued by Hal's relationship with a bunch of these people, particularly with Tysha and the other ex-wife, mother of his child person. I cannot remember her name off the top of my head. But, Liam always does really good interpersonal relationships. And so that definitely is something that I'm intrigued to find out more about. Also, what is this theater? How does it impact the culture that he's involved in, the surrounding area? How does Thiazi fit into that? Or does Thiazi not? Like, is he, is Hallandale very different from that? And so I'm very interested to see how all of those interpersonal relationships will impact and develop Hal as we move forward. At number 10, I'm going Tysha. Now, I'm not a big fan of druids. That's just not... I don't know. I've not had a good experience playing a druid, and so probably some of my own personal biases are coming into that of just druids are not really my vibe. But I love that Abria is always teeing up somebody for a character moment, and I think that develops Tysha as well as a character. And just like with Liam, she always has really great interpersonal relationships with her characters. And, we've already seen her with Hal and her with Julian. And particularly, I cannot say enough about the scene with Julian. I thought that was probably one of the best scenes of the opening episode. But I'm so intrigued with her daughter with Hal and then her son with Julian. I'm like, why is her son training with Julian of all people? Like, I think it was implied that, he's there because he's the best, that Julian's the best. But there's got to be more to it than that. There's got to be somebody that can take up that training that she doesn't have that tenuous relationship with. So why is that? And, what's going on in the interpersonal relationship, like with Octus and obviously she's an orc. She played a very big role in what has happened and what is happening in Armon. And so very intrigued by that. Less intrigued with the, I guess, the class, but so much more intrigued as like a character and as a personality. So coming in at number 9, I'm going to go with Thimble. And I think Thimble can very easily be misconstrued as she's a rogue and, little fairy flitting around and was Thiazi's best friend and co-conspirator and does very typical roguelike things. But I think knowing Laura Bailey, there's so much more to it than that. And so that's, I think, what I'm more intrigued by as well. But also, what was she doing? Why didn't she get to place that item on Thiazi? And there's so much intrigue around. It could be very basic, but knowing Laura and Brennan, it's definitely not basic. So I'm really excited for that. And I've kind of just been thinking about that of like, can you take this very small and dexterous, rogue thief character, and how do you make it interesting? And so I'm definitely intrigued to see that moving forward from Laura. And I think her opening of just the immediate crying and didn't get to say goodbye was so heartbreaking. Like, I had, tears welling up in my eyes. Thinking of, if I didn't get to say goodbye to my best friend. And this isn't so much of a commentary on their roleplay. This isn't what this episode is really about, but you can't talk about Laura Bailey's characters and not talk about her roleplay and making you feel something. So, anyway, that is my spiel on Thimble at number 9. So next up, I'm going Tayor at 8. And I am so proud of myself. I got the Paladin right for this one. But I'm very intrigued by just Travis in general as a player. Because definitely he presents Tayor as this very, calm, wisdom, level-headed, self-sacrificing kind of character. And there's always just that little bit of chaos in Travis Willingham. And so I'm interested to see how that plays out in conjunction with this character. But also in that scene where his ally friend, her name escapes me, was discussing with Wick about, making a place for him and stuff. So I'm very interested of why he needs that place. Why can he not just stand on his own? So that I think I'm looking the most forward to, about just from information that we got from the first episode, but also just in general, like a character that is presented to be, in a paladin situation of fighting for something. It's always that question of, okay, they're fighting for something, they're defending something obviously is very important to them, and how does that provide conflict and relationships and stuff moving forward. Now at number 7, I have Octus, and some of this is a mix of class and characterization. I thought that Alex really gave a physicality to Octus that I definitely find hard when I'm at the table, of bringing in that kind of physicalness to my characters at the table in my role playing. And so I thought that was fantastic, and it made me really intrigued of like, okay, like we're all in on this. And, knowing Alexander Ward, that's who he is. He's always all in. But I think when you're looking at this, and I think we saw, the necromancer part of him, but I also saw that there was a little bit of homebrew. I think I saw that somewhere online. And so I'm very intrigued to see how that goes, because I love the necromancer concept. Didn't necessarily love it in D&D 5e, so I'm interested to see how that is now playing in the 2024 rules, and then also whatever Brennan and co have done for any sort of homebrewing aspect of it. So mechanical wise, very intriguing, but also the fox and who they are and what their relationships are. And, we didn't get a ton of that information from Octus in that very first episode. I'm really intrigued to see how those relationships and stuff impact the physicality of it as well. So I know that there's so much more in this character, and I'm just like itching to get my teeth into it, of like, let's peel back all of these layers of the onion and find out what is really going on in this character. And that kind of leads me into number 6 with Tyranny as well, of you've got to, like, why, like, I think the big question for me with Tyranny is why is she with Wick? Why are the demons being pulled into this? What is the actual patron for Tyranny's warlock? And I love the fact that she's playing the demon. I think that's such a different, because normally you see the tiefling and the devil kind of path come up, but like rarely do you see demons coming up in a PC situation. So I'm really interested to see that. The interaction with her and Wick was very interesting, and the conflict of, what she is versus what the house wants her to be. I think that's a great conflict, and also just, how much is that demon playing into her character, and how much influence does that side of her have? Particularly, a lot of times with warlocks, you have a pulling in different directions. And so is that adding to it? Is that part of it? Like, I'm so intrigued. So I really want to know more about Tyranny, and I thought that Whitney just went all in. And so if she's going all in this early on, I'm so ready to see where we're going with Tyranny. And then following up on that, I think Wick as well, like, we've all seen the stat with, I think it's a 10 whiz for the cleric and a very high charisma. And I have a couple theories on that, which I may put out in a different video. Or if you're really interested, comment down below and I might reply to your comment with my theories. But it's Sam. There's always some long game going on that is going to be very intriguing. And so just knowing, and some of this is just knowing Critical Role and knowing Sam, of being intrigued. But I'm also, there was such a front, I think, to Wick. And it was very obvious that, well, it goes one of two ways. It was obvious that it wasn't fully believed, whether that was an intentional, Sam giving us that of like, Wick actually doesn't believe this, or there is going to be something of like he's trying to make himself believe it, and believes that he does believe it, so he's like gaslighting himself. But, and especially with him being part of one of these houses, I think that brings in a lot of interesting conflict and relationships that you'll see down the road of, because particularly if Wick is selling himself as a cleric of the light and this house and everything, how far does that go before they get pulled into a different direction, before they find something else that resonates with them, maybe more so than what's being pushed in his house. And then also, the interaction with Tyranny, and, Wick is trying to be this very buttoned up and proper, and, Sam even wrote some of his own, like, religious verses, essentially, versus you literally have a demon as your companion, and how that all plays in. I think, particularly them together makes this so intriguing for me. But also, like, is it a cleric? Is it not? Is it a different kind of, like, I need to know more. And I think that really, to me, is driving me in this ranking of what am I just salivating to know more about. So moving on to number 4, Velis. And Ashley Johnson had the least amount of screen time on this episode, and she served. She absolutely served. And as someone who has not necessarily been a fan of Ashley's characters for various reasons, some mechanical, some not, this one I was like, yes, Ashley, like this is what I want. And so I'm so intrigued, and especially, the line of, you're wearing a mourning veil, but not for this funeral, or however it was phrased, was absolutely amazing. And, coming in and, obviously Thjazi was a thief, that was very established, but this stone or whatever that he had from her, or that she thinks he had from her, and then this whole other group of, she's so old, and, she lost her god, and there's so much to play with, and it's so rich. And I think that's the word that keeps coming to mind when I think about Velis, is it's such a rich character. Of there's so much that was given to us in such a short amount of time. And I'm just itching to know more and peel back, okay, well, why is that? Why? How? What are the reasons behind all of this? And so that's where I'm sitting with Velis, of I want, I want a full Wikipedia page so I can just go read everything about it. But I know that's not, going to happen. But I'm thirsting for that knowledge on this character and this other, group of people, and this other kind of culture that is being established with her, that's not necessarily so woven into kind of the other group. You can see the other group and how their relationships have formed, but Velis is coming in kind of separate from that. And so how is that playing into it? And So that to me is very intriguing of then how does she then fit into this group moving forward, coming in as a very adversarial character. So at number 4, Azune. And I, like, character-wise, like, as soon as Louise said the thing about the eyes, prior to the episode, I was like, this, like, he's done some work. He has done some work into making a very contradicting and interesting character. And so I think, looking at him, and especially in the beginning of, helping Thiazi out, but also being one of these essentially, I don't know, I'm calling them city guard military kind of things just in my mind right now. And knowing that he has connections to these people who were in part of this revolution and such in the past, how has he gone from that to this? And, does he believe that this is the right thing to do? Is he a spy in this? Is he, how much of this is he buying into? And I think, so much of that I'm intrigued to figure out of, okay, well, why is he the way that he is now? And is the facade that is being put on, how real is that facade? And I know that Louise is going to absolutely destroy our souls with some good RP in the future, so I'm absolutely ready for that as well. Now, at second, I'm putting Matthew Mercer's Sir Julian Davenos. And, oh man, he gave us a gift. He gave us a gift. And immediately when he showed up on the screen, I turned to my husband and I was like, yes, fantastic. And, I think, again, like, it's kind of similar to Velas. He's showing up in an adversarial capacity, but different from Velas in he does have a past with these people. He does have a history that's coming up. And how is that then going to play as they then split up into their groups and they go off essentially in a collaborative task? How willing is that going to be from him? And maybe, it's one of those almost kind of Mighty Nine things where they didn't want to find the family and they do. Or maybe he just stays, this is it. And I think it takes a very special player and role player to be able to pull off like this very adversarial, we have a negative past with these characters. And so Matt's going to do it justice. And so, but I think the thing that gets me the most is the shadow that's following him. Like, what is that? Is he cursed? Is this a willing thing? Does he know about it? Does he not? Who knows about it? There's so much that you can do with that, or so much that either has been done with that, or I don't know, there's a depth to that of it can go so many different directions, and potentially what Julian knows about it may not be what actually comes to fruition. They're may not be an expert on what's actually happening to him, or maybe doesn't even know it. And so those are some really fun aspects I think that Brennan's going to have to play with Julian moving forward. And finally, at number 1, I have Belair. And this is, I am a museum and antiquities and, art museum girl through and through. I love that. I will spend days on end looking at historical things and things that are interesting and of different values and stuff. And seeing that in a character is so intriguing because there's so much that you know about the world, but that you realize that you don't know so much about the world because, it's a very, I know so much and yet I know so little situation when you are in this position, potentially that Taliesin has put Belair in. And the mask, it's so creepy and it's so great and it's so Taliesin. And I think the thing that really stood out to me was you expected this weird, creepy, maybe almost standoffish character. And yet there was so much softness and so much love in the moment that he had with the children, and showing that, like, he's not just there as business. These are people that he cares about. I think it's very fascinating, and you know, it is a warlock, and warlocks are my favorite. I will be biased toward a warlock all day long. It was the very first character I played. It will be the last character I play, probably, if that time ever comes. But just knowing, like, there's so much to it with Taliesin, and there's so many different intricacies and things that maybe even Taliesin doesn't know, because that's, you know, how he loves to play, of there being things in their backstory that they don't know, which automatically intrigues me more, because it's like, if you don't know, then I certainly don't know. And so I'm ready to find that. I think that's going to be a fascinating aspect as we're looking forward to the future. So that is my final ranking. We'll go through them one more time. At number 13 is Murray, 12 is Cadigan, 11 Hal, 10 Taisha, 9 Thimble, 8 Teor, 7 Octus, 6 Tyranny, 5 Wick, 4 Valus, 3 Azune, 2 Julian, and 1 Belair. So let me know your comments and your thoughts and feelings in the comments. I would love to engage in some conversations with you guys about this, what you thought, what your rankings are, who you're most intrigued to see. And I hope you will join us on another episode of Campaigns and Cantrips in the future. Again, if this is your kind of content that you enjoy engaging with, please make sure you like, follow, and subscribe. And also, if you have any other things that you'd like me to talk about regarding Critical Role Campaign 4 or any of the other previous campaigns, or anything, you know, D&D related in general, please let me know in the comments as well. And we'll see you on the next episode of Campaigns and Cantrips.